What's the number one saving tip according to all of you? What tool can help you implement the number one saving tip? And should you charge your adult children rent? We'll answer these questions and more on this, the 130th episode of the DoughRoller Podcast.
Welcome to the DoughRoller Podcast, where the best thing money can buy is financial freedom. We help you make more, spend less, and invest the rest. And now your host, Rob Berger.
Whether you're just starting out, buried under a mountain of debt, or well on your way to financial freedom, this is the podcast to help you take your finances to the next level. Hey, everybody, hope you're doing well. It is a bright and sunny Saturday morning as I record this podcast. These are sort of my fun podcasts for me. This is the podcast I recorded and then I immediately publish it. I don't always do that. Some get recorded, particularly interviews, and get published, oh goodness, sometimes a week or two later. But this one is where I take the question of the week from the newsletter that goes out. So this would have been from a week ago, Saturday. And I take all of your answers. I read every single email, put it into an Evernote note where I've got all of the great things that you guys have said. And then I share it with you all, both in this podcast and, of course, in the blog post that goes with it. So that's what we're going to do today. And it's about your number one money-saving tip. That's what we're going to cover. But before we get to that, I got a couple of things I wanted to go over, a couple of emails that I got, and then I also want to answer the question, should you charge your adult children rent, which, believe it or not, is actually related to today's topic. So, a week or two ago, we had the question, what's your favorite personal finance book? And a couple of folks sent in some ideas after I had recorded the podcast, and I wanted to share them with you. And what I'm going to do, I'll share them with you now, and then I'm going to go and add them to the article that we published about a week ago. And I'm actually looking at my notes to see if I can figure out what the podcast number was, but I'll track that down. See, I should have been prepared. I could stop the interview or the podcast now and go look. In fact, I will. Hang on for just a second. Don't go anywhere. The power of hitting the pause button. All right, favorite personal finance book is podcast 126. So you can find these if you're interested. Just go to doughroller.net/podcast126. So got two emails on this. The first one came from Lowell. His favorite book was one that I'd never heard of, and it kind of surprises me. It's called The Single Best Investment, Creating Wealth with Dividend Growth by Lowell Miller. Interesting. I guess I'm guessing that's not a coincidence that Lowell sent me in a book written by Lowell Miller. But you never know. Maybe they're not the same person. The Single Best Investment, Creating Wealth with Dividend Growth. So I thought I'd mention that to you. Actually, it's gotten 41 reviews in Amazon and has done quite well. I've not read it, but I'm definitely going to check it out. And the book kind of caused me to think about my own dividend investing. And so I logged into my Vanguard account where I have a brokerage account as well. And I wanted to share something with you, just kind of the power of dividend investing and growth. You know, in the dividend series that I've recorded, and I've had a number of shows related to dividend investing. One of the things that I mentioned is that growth of your dividend, which really should be fueled by growth in a company's earnings, is so critical. And as an example of that, I'm going to give you some actual numbers of one of my investments. I don't normally talk about numbers too much when it comes to my investments because it's really not that important. But I'm going to give you specific numbers on one investment I made just to kind of show you the power of growth. And this is an extreme example, but it's Ford Motor Company. Anything in Ford. How Ford isn't a growth company. How can there be growth in dividends at Ford? I mean, come on. Well, I invested $25,000 in Ford. Actually, for those keeping score at home, $24,997.51 in Ford stock on August 6th, 2012. So that's a little over 2 years ago. And the first dividend check that I got, actually I didn't get a check, it got reinvested automatically into Ford stock. But the first dividend payment, remember these get paid quarterly, was for $135.70. Maybe not much to get too excited about. $25,000 investment, you get $135 back. Although that's quarterly, so let's think about this. We've got to multiply that by 4, so that's 400 and another 140, I think. So 540 if I'm doing my math right. So 540, so that's over 2%. If I'm doing the math right, I should have brought out the Excel spreadsheet, but I didn't. So I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's 2%. So that was $135 though, that first quarter, first dividend check. The next quarter, It jumped to $272. What in the world happened? Well, that was the first quarter of 2013, and it's at that point when Ford's board resets their annual dividend amount, and they raised it a lot. And it took my quarterly dividend from $135 to $272. This boring old company called Ford just jacked up my dividend payment. Love it. The next quarter, of course, they do that typically once a year. So they jacked it up in the first quarter of 2013. So as you would expect in the next quarter, it didn't go up much. It went from $272 to $274. It's only $2, and you think, well, why did it go up at all if they didn't change the dividend amount? And it's because I've been reinvesting my dividends. So I'm getting some compounding. Now, that doesn't seem like much, and it's not. It's $2. But remember, compounding needs one active ingredient, and that's time. And so that's okay. From one quarter to the next, I'll take it. And indeed, the third quarter was $276, up another $2. The fourth quarter of 2013, $278. So it was basically going up, $2 a quarter. But remember, I started at $135. And in the course of 1 year, I'm now up to a quarterly dividend payment of $278. Well, we move into the first quarter of 2014, and of course, the board at Ford increases. Thank you very much. The dividend again, and my payment goes from $278 to $349 a quarter. Then $352, and the last dividend that I received, which was in September, $355. So think about that. In the course of 2 years, the dividend payment has more than doubled. Started at $135, jumped to $355. Now, if you look at their dividends, you can see they did double their dividends from 1 year to the next. That is not, unfortunately, we can't expect that. That's not going to happen every time. But I like this example because normally that kind of growth might take several more years to occur. This happened much more quickly, and it was just maybe dumb luck. I don't know. I happened to invest at the right time as sort of the auto industry was coming out of its funk that it was in 08, 09, 10. I think Ford fared better than most. So here you got this again. People don't think of Ford as a growth company, and yet it's made a lot of good progress in the last few years. Earnings were good. Although it's definitely had its issues in Europe and other places, and we'll see how its aluminum Ford F-150. They're coming out with an aluminum Ford F-150. So I asked my father-in-law, who was an electrician, always drove a Ford truck, still does. I said, "What do you think about that aluminum Ford F-150?" He's like, "I don't know. Aluminum doesn't sound so cool." But I've read a fair amount about it, and it actually seems like pretty cool technology. That's going to be a stronger truck, can tow more, lighter, and gets better gas mileage. All right, this show is not about the aluminum Ford F-150, but I do try to follow the stocks that I own. So I've been reading about that because the Ford F-150 is a big deal when it comes to Ford's profitability. Huge. Anyway, Lowell, thanks for the tip on the book. Again, I'll have a link to that in the show notes to the 126th episode. And I just thought, thanks to Lowell, it got me thinking about dividends, and I thought I'd share a real-life example from my own investing when it comes to dividends and dividend growth. Okay, back to the show. The second email I got about books came from Chris. Chris wrote, "Sorry for being late to respond on this one, but after listening to your most recent podcast, it reminded me that I did not submit the books I found interesting and informative to read. While I had read a majority of the books that were mentioned on the podcast, there were a few that I did not hear mentioned. Understanding that for simplicity's sake, you may have just chosen a few books that only one or two people responded with, which I didn't, by the way, I still feel I should share mine." And Chris, I'm glad you did. He actually shared 4. By the way, I tend to share every response that I get to these questions. I'm trying to think of if there's been any case where I haven't. I suppose someone could say something crazy enough that I would be embarrassed to read it in a podcast. But fortunately, none of you have done that, so I haven't had to worry about that. Okay, here are Chris's books, 4 of them. The first one, at least by the title, is my favorite. How to Be Richer, Smarter, and Better Looking Than Your Parents by Zach, I guess, Bissonette, if I've got his name right. How to Be Richer, Smarter, and Better Looking Than Your Parents. That's the kind of book I think my kids would probably want to write. Well, there you go. I haven't read that book, but I love the title. Get a Financial Life, Personal Finance in Your 20s and 30s by Beth Kobliner, if I've got her name right. Haven't heard of that one either, but there you go. Get a Financial Life, Personal Finance in your 20s and 30s. The third book I have heard of by none other than Peter Lynch, One Up on Wall Street. Peter Lynch has this theory that you should invest in things you know. So he's a big believer in like investing. If you go to Chipotle and you love Chipotle and you think it's a good company, you should invest in it. Not quite sure that's really the way to go, but he has had a pretty significant track record. So anyway, One Up on Wall Street, Peter Lynch. And then, of course, The Richest Man in Babylon. Chris, in his comments, said he's really surprised not to have heard this one mentioned in the podcast. And, he's kind of right. I hadn't really thought about it, but it's a good book. I've read it. The Richest Man in Babylon really shows you about the power of saving. And then the last book, actually I said 4. He actually listed 5. Predictably Irrational, The Hidden Forces That Shape Our Decisions. So there you go. Those are 5 books recommended by a listener named Chris. And as I said, I will add those to the show notes to the 126th podcast. Now, I should say one other thing. When Chris signed off his email, he said this. Chris, he signed it, yours truly, Chris, an avid 26-year-old listener from Indiana. And I was thinking, Indiana? That sounds so familiar. Where have I heard of Indiana? Somewhere. Let's see, I grew up in Ohio. Oh, yeah, that's right. It's that state, I think, just to the west of Ohio. And I think they have a football game today, if I'm not mistaken, around noon or so. Who do they play? Let me Google this. Oh, that's right. They play the Ohio State University, the Ohio State Buckeyes. Chris, what I could say is, I really, good luck to you in the Indiana, but no, I hope we crush Indiana. Sorry, it's a Buckeye thing, and you either get it or you don't. All right, enough of that. Rent. Should you charge your adult children rent? This came up. This actually is related to the topic. We're going to talk about the number one money-saving tip. So our children are both 20, actually. Our daughter just turned 20. I don't have to worry about my son spending money. As you know, he's in the Marines, so he can't spend any money. But they have at various times lived at home as adults. Our son actually moved out and lived on his own for a year. But before that, he lived at home for a while. And then after that, he came home and lived before he went into the Marines. Our daughter is home now, although she'll be heading back to college in January. And the question's always been, when they're living at home, they're grown-ups, they're 20, they have, our daughter has 2 jobs, should I charge her rent? And I've talked to a lot of parents on this topic, and I want to just share the approach I've taken. And it's this. See, my goal is for our children to move out of the house. It's not because I don't love them and don't want them to be around, but it's because they're adults and they should move out and be on their own eventually. Now, I'm not pushing our kids out the door, and I understand when they're in college, they come home for the breaks. Obviously, they're not going to go get an apartment, and I understand all of that. But that's really the sort of the end goal. I don't, I don't envision our children being 35 and living at home. And so the rule that I have implemented in our home is that you can live here rent-free. I'm not going to charge you rent. However, you have to save 50% of your paycheck, 50%. And the theory behind that is, one, I don't want you working and spending every dime, quote unquote, having fun, and not contributing to the home. That doesn't make any sense to me. That's just not you couldn't do that if you lived and had a rent payment to make every month. Why should you do it? Because you're living here for free. And by saving 50%, it's building up a savings account for you so that you will be prepared at some point, whenever that is, maybe after graduation or whatever, to move out on your own. And you'll have that money in the bank to put down a deposit on an apartment, have an emergency fund, and so forth and so on, not to mention teaching you the habit of saving. Now, it's funny, I get a little resistance from the kids. Maybe that shouldn't be a surprise. I think, living on 50% of your paycheck, when you have no bills, none, no food, nothing, I think that shouldn't be so hard. But I guess when you're 20, you see the world a little differently than when you're 48. So anyway, that's the way I've approached it. They save 50%. And our daughter, working a part-time job in high school and then just on breaks in college, has about $4,000 in the bank. And I'm really proud of her for that. And our son had saved up enough money so that when he moved out, he could move out. And he had a deposit for his apartment, and he had a little money in the bank. And so he was able to do that. So that's the approach I take. I thought I'd mention it because it's kind of related to, saving money and how you do that. If you have a different approach on that, or a tip or, your own experiences, Would love to hear from you, dr@DoughRoller.net. Shoot me an email. But I thought I'd share that today. Okay, now on to the main topic. How do you all think we should save money? So if you're wondering how this all comes about and how you can get involved in this, so I send out a weekly newsletter. Goes out every Saturday. It'll go out later tonight. It'll include a link to this show, which will have been published by then. And about a month ago, I just started asking one question a week. The newsletter is links to information on DoughRoller and other sites that I think help you manage your money or I just find interesting as it relates to investing or personal finance. But about a month ago, I started just asking a question of the week, and I was just stunned at the fantastic response from folks. And then I started creating a podcast episode each week with the answers to the question of the week. So if you'd like to get involved and be a part of it, just subscribe to the newsletter. It's free. Just go to DoughRoller.net/newsletter. You can sign up in about 10 seconds. And the newsletter, with rare exceptions, only goes out Saturdays at 7 p.m. Every now and again. In fact, one of those exceptions is coming up because there's going to be a special Black Friday deal that I can't tell you about from a bank that you'll want to know about, and I have to share it on a day other than Saturday. But with those rare exceptions, I only send out one email. I don't bombard you with email. And in any event, I have the question of the week in the newsletter, and you can just hit reply and give me your thoughts. So that's what I did last week. And the question was, hey, what's your number one money-saving tip? So let's get to your responses. By far, the single most response that I received on this question was to automate. To automate your finances is a way to save money. And I got this answer in a couple of different contexts, but let me just read you some things that folks said. Rich said, the easiest way I have found to save money regularly is to automatically transfer a specific amount every month to another account at the bank. So he likes to separate out his money, and he sets up an automatic transfer, and it goes from his checking account to presumably a savings account or some other account, and that's what he does. Jeff wrote in, he was simple. He said, make it automatic, period, end of story. Lisa, she said, my tip, automate a designed amount or percentage of money into savings off the top of your pay. Easier if you're salaried, not sure about how it would work for other pay schedules or commissions yet, can get a little challenging if you don't make the same amount of money every month, but she just right off the top, a percentage or a specific amount right off the top of your pay. Jordan, my number one savings tip is to automatically transfer to savings on paydays. It's like paying myself first, even though technically the government takes their share in taxes first. Yes, Jordan, they sure do. It's funny, my daughter she gets her check every week, or every other week she gets it paid. She'll come home, she'll go, Dad, I got $240, but I should have made $280. But President Obama took that 40. It's always the president. I don't know who the next one will be, but she'll blame whoever it is. It's funny. I should have made this, but the government took my money. Yes, they will do that from time to time. Dharmesh said, automated transfer of funds to your 401k. That's the great thing about a 401k. They're just designed to be automatic, right? I think they're all that way, as far as I know. And I think it surprises people that are a little nervous about saving to a 401k because of, making ends meet, how quickly they forget about it. You really do. You set it up, and that's the power of automation is our brains just forget about it. We are incredibly we can adapt to an amazing set of circumstances. And so we'll completely forget about those contributions, and we'll figure out a way to live on what's left. We just do. And that really is, I think, the power of automation, and I think you see it most clearly in a 401k. Matthew says, I guess I'd say automating your savings, but we only do that with retirement savings at this point. Probably after that, planning, budgeting, and reviewing it monthly. It's interesting. There's a lot of different ways you can automate your finances, right? So, of course, the saving to the 401k is one of them, probably the most common, I would guess. But you can, as others have alluded that I've read, you can set up an automatic transfer from a checking account to a savings account that happens every month or twice monthly. You can set up an online savings account that gets higher interest, and have your sort of main checking account, even if it's a different bank. You can have that transfer set up automatic. Well, one of the things I do is, and this doesn't maybe help me save more, but it just makes life easier, is I automate a lot of my bill payments. So my internet, my cell phone, trash, utilities, all of those payments, mortgage, all those payments are automated. And to the extent I can put them on a credit card, not all of those folks let me do that, but to the extent that I can put it on a credit card, I do, and then I just earn the rewards and, of course, pay it off in full every month. So anyway, let's keep going here. Michael said automatic allotment from checking to savings account. Chris said the same thing. Jeffrey, automate your savings. You will save more than when you depend on willpower. Yeah, that's really the power of automation. Ben said, set a goal and then set up a separate savings account at another online bank. So Ben likes to separate his money. Auto withdraw the money to that account. I mean, keeping it at another online bank, the other advantage is you're just less likely to spend it. And then lastly, for this category, Brian said, my number one money saving tip is to pay yourself first using automatic withdrawals investing. Now, one thing about Brian's email, he had a nice, kind word to say about my son in the Marines. Brian was in the Marines. And I thought I would, in his email, he had you have your signature to an email, and below that, I would give a shout out to something that was in his email. It's something that already occurred, but it was the Warrior Tribute 5K in support of U.S. veterans and the Veteran Low to High Challenge. Warrior Tribute. It was a 5K run in San Diego. Boy, it's been a long time since I've been to San Diego. It was November 8th, 2014. I thought I'd just give wounded warriors a shout out. My stepmother passed away a couple of years ago. I've alluded to this on past shows. I handled her estate. And in fact, literally, she passed away in August of 2012. I am now, as of yesterday, I'm now done handling the estate. It took that long, and this is not a complicated estate. I mean, she managed her money extremely well, but she had a modest lifestyle. She had no debt. I mean, she really was, I think, just the kind of person you'd want to be in terms of managing money. She had no debt. She had enough for retirement. She wasn't wealthy, but she did very well with her money. Her home was paid off. In any event, it took over 2 years to deal with that estate. But I bring her up because she gave a significant part of what she did have to a number of charities, and Wounded Warriors was one of them. And so as the trustee of her trust, it always felt good to when I had to send what she gave to them, I'd write that check out and send it to Wounded Warriors, and that always gave me a good feeling. But I thought I'd give that a shout out because I saw that in Brian's email. Okay, so that's sort of the first big category, automation. It is huge. Now, I mentioned at the top of the show in one of the questions, is there a tool that can help you do this? Well, the truth is there's a ton of tools that can help you do this, but I wanted to share one of them with you real quick. That I started using really just because I wanted to see how it works. And it's called Acorns. That's right, Acorns, Acorns, Acorns. And it's a smartphone app. And what you do, it's an investment. It's a robo-advisor. Think like Betterment, except it's kind of unique in how it works. I started using Acorns about a month ago. So you sign up for an account. You do this all on your smartphone. And what you do is you link as many credit and debit cards to Acorns as you want. The cards that you use on a regular basis to buy things, whatever that might be. It can be a debit card, it can be a credit card. You link those to Acorns. And what Acorns will do is it will look at each purchase you make and round up the purchase to the next dollar. So if you spend something, if you spend $1.50, it rounds up and sets 50 cents aside. Now, here's the thing it took me a while to appreciate. It doesn't actually charge your credit card or your debit card. It just puts that 50 cents aside it keeps track of it. It doesn't actually take any money from you, charge your credit card, charge your debit card, just keeps track. And what happens is once those roundups reach $5 or more, it will then charge whatever debit card you select and take that money and invest it for you. And you can pick your portfolio. You can pick, an aggressive portfolio or a more modest portfolio. And I'm looking at mine now. Mine was I just decided to pick the aggressive one. And so these are all low-cost Vanguard and similar ETFs. So I have 14% in large company stocks, 25% in small company, 20% in emerging markets. 20% in emerging markets is definitely risky, 30% in real estate, and then I have 6% in corporate bonds and 5% in government bonds. So I picked their most aggressive portfolio. And that's how it works. So it just keeps track of your spending, keeps a tally of roundups, and then when you hit $5 or more in roundups, it charges whatever account you want. I just use our main checking account, and it takes that money and invests it for you. Now, that may seem kind of silly at one point. I mean, how much, you think about taking the change jar that so many of us have, and I actually have one, and you pull the change out of your pocket every day and you stick it in the change jar, and how much can that add up to? But I've only been doing this for about a month. Guess what my account balance is? I was surprised. I'm looking at it now. I'm holding my iPhone as I record this podcast. My balance is $134.81. That's from saving change. And I thought this is kind of an interesting application because, one, it certainly is automatic, right? I don't do anything. I set it up and then I'm done. But, I'd mentioned the concept of mini habits in the last podcast 129. That's exactly what this is. This is saving nickels and dimes over the course of course, a month, 2 months, a year, and it really adds up. So I thought this was a pretty cool application. The only downside to it is I still think their fees are a little too high. And they charge $1 a month plus I think it's 50 basis points. Although now I'm not sure I'm right about that. I think it's 50 basis points plus $1. So the fees have to come down, and I suspect they will. I actually said the exact same thing about Betterment when it first came out, and even talked to John Stein, the founder of Betterment, about it. And they ultimately, I'm sure not because of me, but they ultimately lowered their fees to what I think now is quite reasonable. But I thought I'd mention Acorns. I thought it's a pretty neat app. I'm not sure how long I'm going to keep using it. But I kind of like it. It's kind of fun to check it. I go to the app every week or so and to see how much change I've saved. And I'm just always surprised at how much it adds up to, even in the month or so that I've been using it. So there you go, Acorns. You can check that out. Okay, the next biggest category, which we kind of hit on a little bit with being automating your finances, they're very much related, but it is a different concept, and it's pay yourself first. Now, again, a few folks that I've already mentioned alluded to it, but a couple of folks were very specific that this was how they maximize their savings. Stephanie had this to say: make savings a priority and take it off the top, having it come right out of your paycheck through direct deposit. If you never see the money, it is much easier not to feel its loss. Think of it as paying yourself first. And it's just true. It's absolutely been my experience. You don't miss it. Eric said, pay yourself first by moving money into savings and investments through regular, and here we go, automated withdrawals. I don't spend what's not in my checking account. And that's one of the reasons, by the way, why I take each month, I figure out, I set aside a certain amount for future payments, like future insurance bills that I know are going to come due, or saving for a vacation, or saving for gifts at Christmas or birthdays or anniversaries. And I move that money to a savings account. I know I'm not going to spend it if I don't see it. So I couldn't agree with Eric more there. And Jeff said, I'm not sure if I'm late to respond to the question of the week, but here goes. I would say that the best tip for saving money is to pay yourself first. Have it direct deposited into a separate account. Do this, and you get used to living without the money. Before you know it, you feel like you can start to add more, and it is absolutely correct. So those were the two big ones. They're obviously related. Automate your finances and pay yourself first. If you're not doing either of those, I highly recommend it, encourage you to do it. It really, it seems like such a simple thing. There are studies that show there are some companies when you start a new job, if you do not make an election for your 401k, they auto-enroll you. They will automatically enroll you and set aside a couple of percent usually into your 401k. Study after study after study shows that companies that have auto-enrollment into 401k have a higher savings rate than those companies that don't. You automate it. It just happens. It's a form of paying yourself first, right? Because that 401k contribution comes out first, and you forget about it. And then 40 years later, you think, man, I'm so glad I listened to the DoughRoller Money podcast back in 2014 because now I've got a couple $1 million in the bank. Okay, there you go. No, that was not a guarantee, but please automate and pay yourself first. It makes a big difference. So then a bunch of folks kind of gave what I'd call very individualized responses, very specific things. And so I'm just going to kind of read down the list. I'm actually going to start with one from Patrick because it relates to paying yourself first. And here's what Patrick had to say. He said, that's a tough question. Everyone has their own incentives. So true. I'm a big fan of simplicity. So I use Elizabeth Warren's 50-30-20 rule. While I'm not a huge fan of her politics, I'm always happy to see a politician who pushes financial responsibility. So what is this 50-30-20? 50% goes to your needs, 30% goes to your wants, 20% goes to savings. He said, when I counsel people, I take this step a little further. If possible, put 20% into your 401k IRA before the money even hits your account. Boom, that goal is complete. If you have consumer debt, cut back on the want portion and pay that stuff off. It's fair since debt is accumulated when the want portion gets too big. That's so true. Next, be honest with yourself. Separate needs from wants. It's okay to have a couple of wants, but think about it before you spend. Then I usually explain opportunity cost to them. Sounds like Patrick is a good friend to some folks, and I hope they are listening. The one thing he mentioned is simplicity. It's so important. Let me just give you a goofy example. So I go to the chess club on Friday nights. I know. I live an exciting life. And I've not been playing well, and I've been trying to figure out why. I mean, I played a lot in law school, college, law school, after law school, but then I hadn't played for a while. Got back into it about a year ago, and I've been awful, just awful. And last night was the first game that I've played since I've kind of come back to chess over the last year that I thought I played well. I'm sure when I put it into my computer program, it will tell me all kinds of moves that I should have made that I didn't, but I played pretty well. And towards the end of the game, there was very few pieces on the board, and I knew I had a one position. And I saw an interesting way to win. And whenever it's interesting, it's bad. I saw an interesting way to win. I started calculating these different moves, and it was going to be a race to who could convert their pawn to a queen first. And I was going to win the race, but he was going to be just one move away from getting his own queen. And I'm sitting here looking at it, and I thought, this is stupid, Rob. Why are you doing this? There is a simple way to win where he can't ever get a pawn down to the other side of the board for a queen. Why are you trying to make this more complicated than it is? Just take the simple win. And so I did. It's funny how what you can learn from chess to apply to real life and investing. Simplicity is huge. That's one of the nice things about automation. It's simple. And so is the 50-30-20 budget plan that Patrick mentions. I think it's a good one. I don't personally follow it now, but I think it's a very good way to budget your money and to save. So I appreciate, Patrick, you sending that in. And sorry for the chess discussion, but it's been on my mind. All right, let's roll through these. John, he says, my number one unique money-saving tip is for buying running shoes, which should be replaced every 300 to 500 miles. Wow, do people really run that far? Okay, he goes on. You can get big discounts by buying the older models of the running shoe after the manufacturer releases the newer styles. Typically in the late summer or early fall, I purchase my favorite Adidas shoes online in December or January for $60 to $70, a big discount from the $115 to $130 regular price. But be careful not to wait too long or your shoe size might be sold out. There you go. Appreciate that, John. And man, keep going. 300 to 500 miles. I don't think have I ever walked and run that far in my entire lifetime? Yeah, I probably have. Actually, I was training for the Marine Corps Marathon back in 2003 when I hurt my back, but my long run was up to like 17 miles, as I recall. Anyway, Donna and Bill, two separate emails, both said, eat at home, cook your own meals. Obviously, you can save a lot of money there. And it reminded me of the difference. You know the difference between being frugal and being cheap? I don't remember where I heard this from. Frugal is deciding to stay home and not eat out, stay home, cook at home to save some money. Cheap is going out to eat and then stiffen the waiter. Okay. Brian writes in, he says, please keep the questions coming. Great stuff. I'm not sure this is my number one savings tip, but it's the only one I can think of at the moment. Well, there you go. I think you have perhaps mentioned this one in a past podcast. Pay your insurance premium, whether life, auto, or other, in full with one payment instead of monthly or semi-annual payments if allowed by your insurance companies. He's so true. You can get a big discount. Well, I shouldn't say big, but I know like for our auto insurance and my life insurance, they are definitely significantly cheaper if you pay them once a year or even if you just pay them twice a year. The other thing he mentioned, he said, another tip we use in saving for this once a year bill is to divide the total premium up, premium by 12 and set up an automatic, here we go, automatic transfer to a separate savings account. And then they just transfer 1/12 each month. And then when the bill comes due, they have the money. It's exactly what I do. It's funny, I have not automated that process. I add up all of my future payments, as I mentioned, each month and figure out what I should have in the account and move it over to savings. Automating it's better, and that's what Brian does. Okay, Diana, my number one money-saving tip is that I sign up for every app and email for coupons for stores. I only shop when I have a 20% or more off coupon. I also regularly compare cell phones, TV, and internet provider prices, and I change whenever it benefits me. I save hundreds a month using this strategy. Diana, way to go. That is terrific. It reminds me, when I was at the Bloggers Conference, I met a ton of coupon bloggers, just a ton of folks that have coupon sites, and they just do, it could be, some of them have, coupons on everything. Some have very specific types of coupons, and it's just a kind of fun. It's a very different kind of blog, of course, than what I run. But it was fun to meet these people and to see their passion for it. That was the thing. They were all just very passionate about using coupons to save money. You could just tell it had a huge impact in their lives. One of the folks that I met was the folks behind a site called I Heart the Mart. So it's I, the letter I, heartthemart.com. It's a great little site. It's all about Walmart, coupons, and how to get the best deals at Walmart. So I just thought I'd give that site a shout out. They do have, by the way, coupons for other stores as well. But I thought that was a really cool name for a blog, I Heart the Mart. And listen to this. So the folks behind this, a couple, very nice people, this is their full-time career. This is their job. They put a lot of time and effort into this blog. It obviously provides a lot of valuable content to folks, and they're able to have a full-time living on iheartthemart.com. There you go. So I thought I'd give them a shout out after I read Diana's comment. Kim, this was my all-time favorite way to save money, and frankly, I think my wife ought to follow Kim's advice here, and it's this. Don't take your hubby grocery shopping. I would love never to go grocery shopping again, Kim, so my favorite money-saving tip, love it. Jen says, my number one tip is to ask vendors and credit card issuers if you carry a balance to help you save money. That is, ask vendors, TV, internet, etc., to help you lower your cost, and call credit card companies to lower your interest rate if you carry a balance. Asking, I've used this technique before. It works, and if worst case it doesn't, and you've spent 5 or 10 minutes on the telephone. I got our interest on our home equity line of credit reduced. I got the cost of our garbage collection reduced. Jen is absolutely right. This works. Jonathan, if you're going to use an item more than a few times, take the time to purchase a quality item that may cost a little more, but will not have to be replaced as often. Absolutely right. Sometimes we can be penny wise and pound foolish. And I couldn't agree more. Meredith said, my money-saving tip is to switch to a no-contract phone carrier. I'm a huge fan of Ting. I hadn't heard of this one, Ting. Ting. She continues, she says, they offer pay-for-what-you-use pricing and have excellent customer support. In many cases, you can bring your own device to Ting. Before Ting, I had 2 basic flip phones that cost around $65 a month. I upgraded to smartphones, purchased used on eBay, and now my monthly bill for 2 phones averages $33. Wow, that's amazing. Meredith, appreciate the tip. I had never heard of Ting. That's a new one for me, ting.com. There you go. Sally, start saving early, no matter how much per month. That is so critical. That gets me back to Acorns. Heck, if that's all you can do, sign up for Acorns and save your pennies for each purchase. Round up, it's something. That gets back to many habits. Start saving, even if it's $10 a month. Save something. Shelby, my best money-saving tip is to just stay out of stores and shopping sites on the web. No temptation, no buying. There you go. Now that's a big question. We got Black Friday and Cyber Monday coming up. So I guess we'll see how well people do that. I'm not a big shopper on Black Friday. It's just too crazy. The people that maybe I'd like to hear from you. Is there anyone out there that gets to Walmart at at an ungodly hour to wait in line to rush in and get the TV for $50 or something? I always watch this on the news. Unfortunately, it can sometimes turn violent, which is I don't even get that. But do you do that? Anyone do that? Would you shoot me an email if you do and just kind of tell me your story? I'd love to hear it. dr@DoughRoller.net. I just don't do that. Maybe I'm missing out. I'm not sure. Okay, let's see. What else do we have? Klaus writes in, contributing the maximum amount allowable into your HSA account each year and don't withdraw from it. Yeah, we've talked about using your HSA account, your health spending account, or health savings account to actually save for retirement. You have to have a high deductible health plan to qualify for that, but that can be a great way to save money. Eric, my number one money saving tip, which I recently learned about that maybe a few of your listeners haven't heard about, are health flexible spending accounts. I am fairly financially savvy boglehead, but boy, did I miss out on this one. It has been offered through my employer each year since I started in 2008, and only this year did I learn about these. It's basically free money with an infant daughter. I will easily spend a $2,500 max this year, and with my tax bracket of around 25% marginal, I will be saving hundreds of dollars by, in essence, clicking a checkbox. I'm embarrassed to admit that I used to think this was for old people with lots of health problems. I learned about these on a recent Bogleheads forum on the topic of saving. It's funny, I just actually signed up yesterday for my employer's health benefits for next year. And the max, I think, for next year is actually $2,550. So they throw an extra $50 your way. So you sign up for that. It basically gives you pre-tax money to spend for health care. We use it every year. And Eric, I'm glad you found out about it. It is an easy way to save some money. All right, we've got a few more here, and we'll call it a day. Yasha writes in, 1, don't spend money you don't have. Boy, that's simple. It's as beautiful as it is simple. 2, negotiate your cable, internet, and utility rates. We've heard that. Generally, you can get these companies to give you a better rate than they advertise. And it's a weird thing. I mean, I found they'll have rates that they I don't know, they just don't advertise. I guess they figure they can charge people more and they'll only lower the rate if you ask, which is, you think that's just that's a crappy way to do business. But particularly with internet and phone, cell phones and stuff, that's what they do. So ask. And stop buying things just because they are on sale. Oh, I like that. Hang on, let me take a note. Tell wife to stop buying things. Well, on second thought, no. That can make Thanksgiving pretty rough. Never mind. Anyway, great advice. Stop buying things just because they're on sale. Instead, scope out the best deals for the items you do need. And 4th, make saving money a priority instead of having it be leftovers. You guys should come on. You guys should handle this show. I should just turn the show over to you guys because this has been really good advice. A couple of more. Sachin, and I hope I get that name right. Wait a week to think over and buy that gadget or shoes or upgrade you need. I've been trying to work with my daughter on that. My daughter has this interesting habit. She'll just go shopping crazy, come home with bags of stuff, and a couple of days later regret the purchases. So off she goes to return them. And I keep trying to tell her, you see something you want, just wait a couple of days. Don't buy it right then. Think about it. And, chances are she's not going to want it. But instead, she buys it all, comes home, has to go back, return it. She's a work in progress, aren't we all? The last tip was an interesting one that I had never thought of from Caitlin. Here's what she says. Forecasting my net worth makes me feel like I can rise above my debt. That's a great tip. I've never done that before. I've never thought, well, wait a minute. If I keep doing what I'm doing now, paying down debt, saving money, a year from now, my net worth will be this. 3 years, it'll be that. 5 years, it'll look like this. But I could see that being very motivating. If I keep doing what I'm doing, if I keep doing the right things, yeah, I may be a little frustrated with my situation now, but look, I've done the math. Here it is. 2 years from now, we'll be here. 5 years from now, we'll be there. I could see that being very, very motivating. So Caitlin, I really appreciate that tip. I thought that was a very creative way to think about your finances, something I haven't done, but I could see that being very motivated as you try to make progress in your finances. So there you go. Those are the number one money-saving tips. If you are listening and you didn't get a chance to participate, shoot me an email. Still love to hear your tips. Be happy to share them on a future podcast. Just email me at dr@DoughRoller.net. I will have all of these on the blog, along with the links to those books that we heard about at the top of the show from Lowell and Chris. You can find it on the blog. It'll be linked to in the newsletter. You can always just go to, if you're listening to this months and years down the road, just go to DoughRoller.net/podcast130, and that will direct you to the show notes for this episode. Well, there you go. Hey, hope you have a great day. And Chris, sorry about the Ohio State Buckeyes Indiana thing, but who knows? I'll tell you this, if Indiana beats Ohio State, I will be the first one to come on this podcast and say you whipped us and you played a good game. Hey, until next time, remember, the best thing money can buy is financial freedom.